Jake, I need a good intro to this video. I don't know what The stigmatization of mental health. Mental health stigma. Oh, I got one, bro. I got one. Hold on. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Mental health stigmatization in society.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Forget it. We're back. It's episode 2. Let's just get into it. So as promised, this video is going to cover what stigma is. We're going to cover who it affects, who is guilty of it, and where it comes from in society. So let's just start with a simple definition of what stigma is. It's the negative attitudes, beliefs, or our perceptions of seeing someone with a mental illness as being different than the rest of us. So in society, there's basically 2 types of recognized stigma. The first one being social stigma, and this is the direct result of the psychiatric label that is given to the person and the negative attitudes and beliefs associated with that label. So this could be believing that their illness is faked or imagined or self-inflicted, like the blaming eyes and whispers about how a certain person might be acting. It's really not recognizing a person's lack of control because of their illness in acting inappropriately in certain situations. The second kind of stigma is self-stigma. That's internalizing the stigma of society in the person with the illness. And there'll be more on this later after we cover where stigma comes from and who it affects. Alright, so next we have who's guilty of it, and to let the cat out of the bag, it's everybody.
What are you talking about?
It's ingrained in our society. It's in our attitudes, it's in our language, it's in how we talk to one another on a daily basis. It's the way that we go about talking about mental illness in society, how for years it's been hush-hush and not something that's addressed publicly most of the time. It's those harbored beliefs and classical and old school traditional styles of thinking that are in all of us and in society in general. And it pops up in the smallest nooks and crannies of everyday life. Calling someone crazy or weirdo or psycho. It's in the language we use. It doesn't seem surmountable, but these all reinforce negative stereotypes about mental illness. So, yay, that's great. No, we're all bad people. We all hold these beliefs. Now, let's figure out where these beliefs come from, how this started. So like I said, because it is so ingrained in our society, it's really hard to pin down one specific place where we can say stigmatizing beliefs came from this source. It's more so the fact that it pops up repeatedly in several places in our daily lives where there's room for vulnerability in our beliefs and our thinking. So I'm going to hit on those as we go forward. So the first way that these beliefs might have entered your head or anyone's belief system would be learned discrimination against these people. So if growing up your peers or your teachers or your parents never brought up mental health, maybe you never had the chance to think unbiasedly on your own. So as humans, we tend to want to fit in with others. So if you were growing up and you heard things about mental health, maybe they were stigmatizing beliefs or old school ways of thinking from your parents or your teachers, or it's really possible that those ideas could have been reflected on you and you just kind of went along with it because that was what helped you fit in and what got you cookies and good grades and all that other stuff. So undoubtedly the most responsible thing for stigma of mental illness in society today is the media. And I'm not talking only about the misrepresentation of mental illnesses in film and TV and literature, but also inaccurate portrayals of what goes on in the real world on the news and the media coverage there. So there are a couple common ways that we see mental illness falsely depicted in film and TV. Most commonly, we see the typical psycho serial killer who can't control his urges to kill and goes on extreme killing rampages that are usually bloody and gory and very vivid and visual for the audience.
Here's Johnny!
We also have the fact that these people are much more likely to be criminal and violent in general. They're depicted as being more dangerous and someone that people should stay away from or they're going to get hurt.
Listen, you can't stand for this, all right? You said you weren't gonna stand for this. Come on. Andy, what the fuck? Hey, easy.
Ian. Look at me. I'm cool. Everything's cool.
Additionally, we have the fact that people with mental illnesses in movies are depicted as not being able to recover. A lot of times, all of these illnesses are depicted as being the same. They're extreme and they can't be controlled. A lot of times, they're a direct result of something that the person did. They're depicted as being self-inflicted and something that you can't recover from, which is just inaccurate. It is wrong. Finally, we have the fact that there's always something that physically separates this individual from others. They have to be different in some way, whether it's the fact they have the crazy eyes and the crazy hair, or the fact that they're wearing different clothing or appear childlike or silly or incompetent. And this is something that the costume designer and the director work diligently on and meticulously pick every little detail to try and depict that this person is different from everyone else in the movie. So moving away from depictions in film and TV, I'm going to spend a little time talking about how the inaccurate representations on the news and media coverage of people with mental illness negatively influence the way we see people with mental illness in society. So to start, the media grossly exaggerates the rates of occurrence of violence of those with mental illness and mental disabilities. You know, a lot of those headlines like "Crazed Killer Murders 4" or "Psychotic Murderer on the Run, Finally Captured, Brought to Justice," whatever. They grab eyes, they grab headlines, they're attention getters. But what this kind of coverage and this reporting does is it alters our perceptions of people with mental illness. It creates negative stigma in society. What the news fails to tell you is that mentally ill people, they account for the vast, tiniest sliver of violent crimes in the US. So just in general, being exposed to it at all, it's gonna inflict some of these negative attitudes and this negative stigma towards people with mental illness on you. Also, it perpetuates this idea that we can't associate with people with mental illness, that we should be fearful of them. So it goes like this. In our health class in high school, it's not like the health teacher got up there and told you about anxiety and depression along with the birds and the bees talk. You know, it would have been nice if maybe they mentioned it, but not a lot of us were taught that stuff. So what this does is it creates the fact that the media and TV and film are the main educational source for all things mental health for the vast majority of people in society, which is scary. So for people who are uninformed and didn't get educated and never took an intro to psych course, because that's the only reason I know any of this stuff, it's extremely easy to fall victim to what you see on the TV and be misinformed and hold false beliefs and hold stigma. It's really easy to think that way. But that's why I'm making this. So like, we're trying. So the second type of stigma that I talked about earlier, the self-stigma. That's the other person that stigma affects in this situation. It's not just you, but it's the person with the mental illness as well. Here's an example of what it might look like. So say someone with anxiety, constantly worried about they're not good enough, they're worried about their place in the world, or just that something is going to go horribly wrong. So not only do they have to deal with this intrusive thinking and negative thinking all the time, but they have to deal with the fact that the world and everyone around them is telling them, yeah, you can't do that. So what ends up happening to these individuals in the worst of cases, those negative thoughts and the negative stereotypes, they start to buy into them. They start to believe them about themselves. The stigma creates a feeling of not wanting to be viewed as an outsider and not wanting to be viewed as different, because that's the only way that we see people with mental illness in society, because that's what we see on TV and that's how it's covered in the news. And also because of lack of education, but I mean, I've covered that. So in the worst cases, stigma directly relates to people not seeking treatment, not seeking help, and it creates just a bigger and tighter ball of problems and worry and anxiousness, and it can turn out really bad. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up our first episode of what stigma looks like in society, who's affected by it, and how it infiltrates our everyday life and our daily thinking and beliefs. So, as always, thank you for watching. If you've gotten to this point, you've inevitably found out that I'm just as bad as outros as I am as intros, but I'm working to get better. I'm learning as we go, so they will get better as we move forward in this short little series here. So, as always, share this video, share this series with your friends, and thanks for watching. There's more to come, so stay tuned.